Okay, folks, looks like it was an interesting week this past week. Of course, there was no Syracuse game, which is good because it gave Sean Tucker time to recuperate from being left in the Wagner game too long. But I digress, and a lot of Orange fans digress, because now we really get to see what the Orange are made of. It's ACC time for pretty much the rest of the schedule, with the exception of around Halloween. Although you can kind of say Notre Dame is kind of a half ACC team, if you know what I mean. Heck, they play five ACC opponents every year in football, but they're still independent. But it all really begins this Saturday at the Dome. North Carolina State comes in, and then after that, we go down to Death Valley. Although it hopefully won't be our debts, maybe we can show Dabo Swinney that, hey, the Clemson defense doesn't work without Mr. Venables. But of course, that's a noon start. And of course, you know how we hate noon games around here. Heck, when we tailgate at noon, we have bacon and eggs on the tailgate grill. But I digress. And of course, the 29th, just before Halloween, Notre Dame comes to the Dome. You know, we got our way with Notre Dame coming to the Dome because usually they like to be in a neutral spot, like they were this past Saturday against BYU. Yeah, the Mormons and the Catholics. But of course, I'm a Catholic, and the Catholics show we can beat the Mormons any day of the week and twice on Sunday, in football. But I digress. I'm not about to talk about Notre Dame. Syracuse, it's now time. Everybody's now predicting Syracuse to be in the postseason. Of course, they don't know which bowl game. Some think that we're coming up to Boston to play in the bowl game. Some say we're going to Florida. Some say we're playing SEC opponents. SEC is pretty much the measuring stick. And you know what? They're true, especially with the resurgence of Tennessee in the SEC. Boy, it's been real long since the Volunteers really mattered, and now they're right up there with the Crimson Tide and the Bulldogs. And it'll be an interesting game when Alabama and Tennessee collide. Alabama kind of looks vulnerable, don't you think? Yeah, Texas A&M, who couldn't beat Appalachian State, nearly knocks off the Crimson Tide. Well, of course, I'm getting off on another tangent. It's time to see what Syracuse is made of. Have Robert Anae and John Beck really tooled the offense to where we can get there and finally finish among the elite of the ACC opponents. It'll be interesting starting this Saturday against North Carolina State. Let's go Orange! Let's go Orange! All right, we go from talking about the Orange to talking about the Bills. Finally, the Bills' offense finally kicked back into gear. Even though it took about a quarter or so, we finally kicked back into gear, especially against a team that kind of causes family divisiveness. Yeah, my brother's been a Pittsburgh Steeler fan since the days of Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, and the rest of the Steel Curtain. But this time, we got the better of Pittsburgh, especially since they wanted to put Pickett on a fence. Of course, Pickett threw for 320-some yards. And we allowed him to dink and dunk. That sometimes the bend but don't break kind of defense can work. You can do that so long before. But of course, we didn't. We stayed firm. And of course, Gabriel Davis showed that maybe he's back into form. A big 98-yard touchdown catch, the longest in team history. Plus, a couple of our newer guys showed their worth scoring touchdowns. Khalil, I'm going to use the salt shakur, scored on a touchdown. Yeah, you could have the salt shakur, you could have the pepper shakur. Just don't have the Tupac shakur. I'd rather have a six-pack, if you know what I mean. And of course, James Cook, looking like his older brother Dalvin, scoring a touchdown. Yeah, he can cook. He really fried him on that touchdown run. Of course, he can bake, he can saute, he can even poach, he can even boil. But you know what? We'll save those superlatives for later. All in all, a big 38-3 destruction of Pittsburgh. And now it's time for the rematch. Yes, can anybody say 13 seconds? That's what separated us from victory. Of course, Leslie Frazier with his defensive calls, allowing Kansas City to get into field goal range, and then them, because they still had those questionable overtime rules, marching down and scoring, knocking us out of the playoffs. You know what? Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. He's probably the top quarterback now in the NFL. And yeah, it is going to be out there in Kansas City when we play. But you know what? It's time to show that, hey, we are the new sheriff in town. The road to the Super Bowl is going to go through Buffalo, because Buffalo finally played like a Super Bowl contender against Pittsburgh. You know what? It's time to show Mahomes, hey, you've had your time in the sun. Now it's time for Josh Allen and the Bills to shine. 4-1, baby. Let's beat those Chiefs. Go into our bye week. Get some of those players back from injuries, and then start rolling against the Packers on Sunday night. You know what? It's always pretty good to play somebody from a cold area, but we're going to show those cheeseheads they can't win in Buffalo. And we're going to show Aaron Rodgers, hey, don't you think you ought to retire? I'm going to go from talking about them to saying about the convergence of a few seasons. Baseball now is in its postseason. It really kicks into gear today with the American League Divisional Series. And those were some interesting wild card series, especially watching the Mets, who a lot of people thought were going to go quite a way, and maybe even hinted at a Subway World Series, lose to the San Diego Padres. Of course, people around here have gotten something to cheer about, because the Yankees now pretty much are emerging as one of the favorites. But of course, I think the road to the World Series might go through Houston for the American League Championship Series, and also the Dodgers, who have the best record in baseball. And you know how nostalgic it would be if the Yankees and the Dodgers were to meet in the World Series. But of course, we got the judge. All rise! 62 home runs. The new American League record holder, beating Roger Maris. Of course, Cleveland might have something to say about it. Cleveland, the Guardians, is the opponent for the Yankees in the American League Divisional Series. You know what? I'm just going to venture off here and say, Guardians. It's almost like the Washington Commanders there in the NFL. But of course, political correctness has to raise its head. Can you say, not Columbus Day? Can you say Indigenous Peoples Day? I knew you could. Of course, we'll save Fred Rogers for another time. Can the Yankees get past the Guardians? But then, with Houston being the heavy favorite in their series against Seattle, like I said, the American League Championship Series might have to go through Houston. Can we see if Atlanta and the Dodgers meet in the National League Championship Series? It'll be an interesting postseason. And of course, like I said, it's the convergence of seasons. As in the next 2 weeks, the NHL drops the puck on its 106th season. The NBA tips off for its 76th season. It's going to be interesting seasons for both. Can the Colorado Avalanche get the Stanley Cup again? And of course, for local people, can the Sabres finally snap what is an 11-year playoff drought? You know what? You can't make the playoffs for 11 years in the NHL. You got to figure, what the hell's going on? What's the leadership? And of course, in the NBA, Golden State and Stephon Curry kind of reign supreme. But can Boston get back to being the beast of the East? And one good note, all the NBA teams have retired the number 6 in honor of Bill Russell. He was an iconoclast, but one of the greatest centers and a great trailblazer for the NBA. You know what? He deserves the honor, much like Jackie Robinson deserves the honor for baseball. Now, can we do that for hockey and for football? We got our choices. And I'm going to go from talking about that to quickly talking about local. Mercifully, the season ended for Minders. Yeah, 8-man football just doesn't seem right. And we lost to North Star in the 8-man playoffs. Another winless year for a team that was once a pretty proud team. And of course, Waterloo's again winless because, yeah, we did lose to York Pavilion when they came to Tom Coughlin Stadium. I mean, how much longer can fans in the Finger Lakes stand this? Do we have to merge Minders and Waterloo in football? Ah! That's what I say. And last but not least, I kind of wonder, is the GOAT finally bitten off more than he can chew? That's what everybody's saying about Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. Well, if you ask me who probably the best quarterback in NFL history was, I'd probably tell you Johnny Unitas because of the way he transformed the NFL into a more passing league when he came into the league. But of course, what I'm saying about Brady, him and Giselle have hired divorce lawyers. Like I said, coming back for another year, which I think was unwarranted with Brady. You gotta wonder, did Giselle say, enough's enough? This girl from Ipanema's gonna go walking onto the catwalk, and this girl from Ipanema is gonna walk all over you. Now is bossa nova music gonna start playing? We'll see. That's all I have for this week. Till next week, fans.